push record to the cloud. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, everybody, for the ongoing Second Tuesday Master Gardener presentation series at the Brainerd Library. We are both on Zoom and in person today. And I'm getting a note on lots of reverberation. Let's see. I think I won't be doing much talking, so hopefully when Gary's talking, it will be better, Paula, but let me know if that's not the case. So my name is Brittany. I'm the coordinator for the Crow Wing County Master Gardener Volunteer Program. Good to see you all here today. And we have Gary Deters, who is a lawn water conservation educator at the University of Minnesota. So take it away, Gary. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Glad to be here. And so today we'll talk about the best suitable grasses for Minnesota, and then like repair tips and just seed selection, and give you some ideas for this coming fall or late summer seeding, which we're really approaching the best time. And for, say, Crow Wing County, this might be your window for the best time to seed, just because of the warm days, the cooler nights, the longer nights, the shorter days. So it all kind of adds up to better seeding window. And so I'll give you a quick background on myself, my education. And so I graduated from the University of Minnesota in the environmental horticulture program with an emphasis on turf grass management. And I was in the golf industry for a long time. So I actually let's see, it was about 23 years in golf. And I rose up the ranks and became golf course superintendent. And then 5 years ago, I started working at the university. I just decided to leave the golf industry. I loved it, but it was just, I just needed to do something different. And I was able to get a job at the university taking care of the research plots. And I did that for 3 years. And then I was able to move into this position as lawn water conservation educator in the end of 2023. So I've been doing this. So I've learned a lot, even being in this different position that I never would have learned in the golf industry. So it's been quite enjoyable. And so we're going to talk about lawns, and many homeowners have them. And I'm guessing many of the people in the audience do. And even if you don't have a big lawn, I think some of these tips can really help you, because I know a lot of master gardeners speak with the public, and they get a lot of questions about lawns, and it's kind of a tough thing to answer. And I even find myself, I don't know everything, and I try to help them as best I can. So I think with this talk tonight or today, you'll learn a lot about maybe some things you'd never thought of before. So why do we have lawns? Aesthetics, people like to have a nice looking lawn. Recreation, playing in the yard, relaxation, non-activities. You can relax or lay down like that person is, especially compared to pavement. Who wants to lay down on pavement? It's kind of a relaxing hobby. Some people like to take care of it. And then a place for pets to go. So I hear lots of examples about pets. So that's a big one. And here are some other reasons. Weed prevention. We like to say the best weed prevention is a healthy growing lawn. Runoff, you can see there where the grass is growing, there isn't soil on the sidewalk, but where there's soil, you can see it spilling onto the pavement there. So and then a cooling effect, where the synthetic field is, and this is in Maryland, but the synthetic field is 157 degrees, where the natural field is 94 degrees, and this is on a 100-degree day. So cooling effect, definitely. So turf grass identification, will go through each of the species, and it's a tough thing to identify grasses. And we want to know why turf grass identification is important. So uh, you need to know mowing requirements, fertilizing requirements, watering requirements are all different for each species. Winter stress tolerance, summer stress, they all have their different uh, tolerances for the weather. Pest management, establishment method, where it's good to know what you're planting because sometimes certain grasses germinate faster than others. Aesthetics, they all kind of have a different look to them. And then the biggest reason why is because all of these affect every management decision you make when it comes to your lawn. So Minnesota is cool season grass, and warm season grasses can do okay here. Basically though, it's got to be from June to early September, because once it gets that cold temperatures, they start to go dormant. But in summertime, we get a lot of questions where somebody might say, yeah, I've got this spot in my lawn that is all brown until June, and then in September it turns brown again. I said, well, you probably have a warm season grass in your lawn. So like I said, it can do quite well in the warmth here. So what are the appropriate species for Minnesota lawns? So we generally break them down into high input and low input, where Kentucky bluegrass and perennial ryegrass are considered high input, while tall fescue and fine fescues are considered low input. And I'm going to go through each of these grasses and kind of talk about the advantages and disadvantages of all of them. So Kentucky bluegrass, right? This is the most popular grass species in Minnesota. It has great attributes when highly maintained, and that's why we call it a high input lawn, because the dark, dense, uniform lawn, when it's fertilized and watered, and we're like a year like this when we have a lot of rain, there are a lot of lawns that are looking very well this year. And the availability of it, you can either get it from sod or seed, and then high traffic. You'll find most sports fields are going to be Kentucky bluegrass, and it can survive the harsh winters. So what are the disadvantages? So, right, the high fertilizer needs, high water needs, they kind of go hand in hand. And the poor salt tolerance. So if you see areas struggling next to sidewalks that get salted, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But that's just something to keep in mind, that the poor salt tolerance. And then shade. And a lot of times a lawn might have been sodded with Kentucky bluegrass, and then years later, once trees grow and whatnot, or the shade from the house, the lawn might start to suffer a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why, is just because of the poor shade tolerance. And so we've got another one here. So slow germination. One of the things that is a challenge with Kentucky bluegrass establishment when you're talking about seeding is the slow germination. And we do like to recommend mixtures and species with Kentucky bluegrass, just because of that fact. And you'll see in this instance, this photo was seeded on May 15th. The photo was taken May 30th, and the tall fescue has germinated much quicker and starting to establish already, where the Kentucky bluegrass is just kind of hanging in there yet, or it hasn't really emerged yet. So and that's where it can lead to weed encroachment. And I'll see that in a lot of plots that we have on campus, some research plots, where you'll see higher instances of weeds because of the slower germination of the Kentucky bluegrass. So, some the next one, perennial ryegrass, the advantages are quick germination, rapid establishment. And, you know, a lot of times these things can germinate in 3 to 4 days. And under ideal seeding conditions and keeping the seed wet, and it has good wear tolerance and blends very well with the other cool grass species. And here's another one that it's very aesthetically pleasing. A lot of golf courses in the South overseed with perennial ryegrass in the wintertime, and it looks great and it looks fantastic. But here is some of the problems with perennial ryegrass. The disadvantages are the poor winter hardiness. You could see these research plots here on the left side where all the perennial ryegrass pretty much died, but the fine fescue is totally okay. It requires high fertilizer needs, and then the shade and heat tolerances are very poor with this. And honestly, the research team, we basically don't recommend perennial ryegrass in Minnesota with like if you look at a bag of seed, and we'll talk about this later too, but we recommend not using very high percentages of perennial ryegrass just because of these issues. And you know, if you were to plant a whole lawn, and you wouldn't, but if you were to plant a whole lawn of perennial ryegrass, it's kind of not a matter of if your lawn will die, it will be when, because all it takes is one bad winter. And if you have a monoculture of perennial ryegrass, it'll get zapped. So definitely something to look for. The next one, fine fescues, and there are five species of fine fescues. And one of the interesting things is that they all look relatively similar to one another. And I have some little plants like that of fine fescues in the greenhouse, and sometimes I don't know what they are until I look at the name, just because they look pretty similar to one another. And but they're very good grasses. The advantages of them is the slow growing, slow vertical growth, which means less mowing than, say, Kentucky bluegrass, less fertilizer and water. It'll reduce your maintenance needs and costs because you don't have to mow as much and you don't have to fertilize as much. And then the most tolerant grass with shade. So if you have an area in your yard that's like mostly shade, we in general recommend fine fescue. So again, remember this photo with the perennial ryegrass, good winter hardiness. And now here come the disadvantages. So while the positives are the fact that it's slow growing, the negative of that is when it gets damaged by, injured by disease or traffic or whatever, they're slow to recover. So that's the one issue with them where, and I've seen these before. I've taken all of these photos and I've seen that it's just like this turf plot on the left. It took a long time for that to recover. It did eventually, but it took a while. And then the photo on the right there, that was turf that was damaged when somebody drove a cart over it. The grass might have been stressed through drought, but it was very high temperatures that it was stressed. So kind of one of those issues with fine fescue. Tall fescue, the drought tolerance is the best of all the grass species for Minnesota for the cool season. You could see where the tall fescue, this is an area without irrigation, but the tall fescue is still thriving where the Kentucky bluegrass is not. And this is one of those islands in a parking lot, and there wasn't any irrigation, but that's where the tall fescue can thrive under those situations where Kentucky bluegrass cannot. Oh, let me go back. So one of the things that is nice, and this is why we kind of consider it a low input, is because it can be irrigated less frequently than say Kentucky bluegrass or perennial ryegrass, and because it has that deep root system, and that's what makes it a low input grass. And then it exhibits the very good heat tolerance, and that's why it does thrive during the summer, where say perennial ryegrass does not. And it can be better adapted for say driveways or sidewalks right along where maybe you know, there might be bare turf from heat or crabgrass. We're working on some research where we're seeding into these crabgrass areas with tall fescue. And so maybe look for that in the future. Some disadvantages is the slower spring green up, and I see this all the time. I'm trying to convert my lawn from Kentucky bluegrass to tall fescue, and I'm so that I kind of have a mixture of them. But in areas where I have a lot of the tall fescue, it's usually a couple weeks behind the Kentucky bluegrass when it comes to spring green up and the fine fescue you can see in the photo there. So and then susceptibility to the turfgrass disease snow mold. So some winters, you know, if there isn't a lot of snow mold present, it's fine. But then others like this one, now it'll come back in most cases. So, but it again slows its like recovery and aesthetics because it takes a little while for it to come back. So, and then the one of the other big things with tall fescue is if there is ice cover for an extended period of time in winter, you know, you maybe have a low spot that collects water and then turns into ice, it might kill it. So and then public perception of tall fescue. A lot of times people think, well, tall fescue is that big, ugly leaf and it sticks out in my lawn and I mow it. And 2 days later, it's tall again and it sticks out and I don't like it. Well, they have really new varieties and cultivars that are more advanced, from advanced breeding. They've improved them to be turf types, where the old cultivar, and I'll again talk about that later, Kentucky 31 tall fescue has that big wide leaf blade, and the newer cultivars are darker, greener, finer textured, so they kind of compare more similarly to Kentucky bluegrass. So what are the best ways to identify grasses? So, in a home lawn setting, a lot of times you might have a mixture, or, you might have say a dead spot, and then somebody buys a bag of grass seed and seeds it, and they don't know what's in the bag of grass seed. And all of a sudden you've got different looking grasses in your yard. So to kind of help with that, and it's not super in depth, but it'll at least give you a little bit of help. Turf ID. So there are some vegetative features that can help in the aid of identifying, and we'll kind of go through them. And you'll see that little drawing on the right where the flower, the inflorescence, is a really good way to identify grasses. But the problem is we're mowing them and we're mowing off the inflorescence. So that's why it's not a very usable way to identify grasses. So one good way is the leaf blades, and you can kind of see we've got Kentucky bluegrass on the left, fine fescue in the right, and tall fescue fine fescue in the middle, tall fescue on the right. I've got the 3 photos of the grasses that I took them from. And so they, side by side, they do kind of stand apart from one another. And then here's kind of an up close photo of them. I use this one all the time. So Kentucky bluegrass kind of has that boat shaped tip. And it's kind of neat, like if you're looking at this boat shaped tip and you take your thumb and you go up against the blade and kind of split the blade in half, it kind of looks like a snake tongue. So it's kind of cool if you want to practice that just to show people, because it is pretty neat. Fine fescue, does have that very thin blade. And then perennial ryegrass has kind of that shiny leaf on the back side of the blade. So that helps with the identification. And then we've got like tall fescue has this auricle. And you can see how veiny this tall fescue blade is, where the Kentucky bluegrass just kind of has that mid vein in the middle of it that that can help. And you can also see again where that boat shaped tip is kind of coming up, that new leaf. So we also have different habits of how they kind of spread, and we got the spreading versus bunch type rhizomes with, say, Kentucky bluegrass, and there are the creeping red fescues. That's kind of why they're creeping red fescues, is they spread by rhizomes, where the bunch type only spread through tillering. And so the new shoots grow from the base of the existing plant. So they do kind of spread, but and that's what makes Kentucky bluegrass such a great lawn, is that it does recover very well because it has these rhizomes that spread pretty quickly, where the bunch type grasses don't spread quite that fast. They do, but not very quickly. And so the bunch type grasses are typically tall fescue, perennial ryegrass, and then chewings fescue, hard fescue, and sheep fescue. So since we'll kind of save the questions to the end, we'll just skip this slide, and we'll kind of talk about if you want a successful lawn repair. So, these are some of the questions that you're gonna kind of ask yourself, or if the person, you should ask the person, like, what species or mixture do I want? Like if you want a low input lawn, you really need to know what that, okay, I want a low input lawn. What's a low input lawn? Well, it's the fine fescues. I'm probably going to want a mixture of fine fescues. So that's that question. Like, is it a small or big repair? Do I need seed or sod? And sometimes that is the question itself right there. For like, if it's a small repair, you're probably not going to buy or need sod. You're probably going to seed it. What season will the repair take place? Is it spring, summer, fall? And then, what is the lawn used for? Because, if you have a lawn with a lot of activity, kids, pets, you're playing lawn games, you're probably not going to want fine fescue just because of the poor traffic tolerance and recovery. And that's where, you kind of need to know, well, I know that Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue are very good for traffic tolerance. So those are going to be probably my options I look at. So we've got thin spots, like the bare spots, and then these thin spots, you can kind of see where it's thin, because I know for a fact this lawn 25 years ago was sodded with Kentucky bluegrass. So again, over the years, you're going to have thin spots because you have a grass that's doesn't take to the shade very well. And so what I did in this case, and I think I have it in later in the slide, where we overseeded with fine fescues to kind of incorporate a good shade tolerant grass in there. We've got shade issues again, where that's a complete bare spot. And this was at a friend of mine's place. And it's fine fescue, and I overseeded that area. And it's kind of neat because the bare area here has the new fine fescue cultivars, where the fine fescue on the left here, it just looks completely different because the newer cultivars of fine fescue are greener, and it's pretty neat once you see the before and after photo. And unfortunately, I didn't include that in this talk. Winter damage. So you see the winter damage, that's actually my house. we had I think it was the 2023 into, or I'm sorry, 2022 going into 2023, the winter was terrible. And so I overseeded this area, and I have some other photos, but I overseeded this area with tall fescue. And it's pretty neat seeing the photos now because I have a lot of tall fescue in my lawn. And then we've got ice or salt damage, plow damage, and then the lawn repair methods. We've got sod, seed, and we'll discuss both and like the advantages and disadvantages of both. So sodding, the advantages, instant, and it typically comes weed free. Hopefully that's the goal. Rapid establishment. This thing is established within a couple weeks, and it's, there isn't competition typically from weeds for a couple years, unless whoever installed it doesn't do not get the seams tight and close together, because I see that too, where if it's installed incorrectly, you're going to have weeds coming through the seams, and it's kind of it sticks out like a sore thumb. And then slope protection, so it can help with washouts, but make sure that you use sod staples if you're using it on a slope, and then it's less affected by weather. So some of the disadvantages is the expense, for a single roll or large areas. You can see that that pallet of sod right there. And, if you do it yourself, or if you have a landscape company do it, it's going to be a lot of extra money, but also potentially a lot of extra work. And the high water needs to establish it to make sure it doesn't fry. And, again, you can see the bottom photo there. If it dries out, it might come back, but it also might not. So that's just something to keep if you're sodding, to make sure it gets through that period and keep it wet enough. And then again, like here, I got another one with, look at all those rolls of sod. And that's a lot of work, especially if you're going to try to do it yourself. So I've done many, many sod projects in the years, and I don't miss doing them. And like, here's another one. So this was in a neighborhood close to me, May 24th. You could see all the water on the roadway. And then just to keep this going into the heat of the summer, and fortunately for this person, we got a lot of rain this year, but and this was just August 3rd. It's already, it just needs a lot of water to stay looking nice. And so I kind of pay attention to this, because me and my wife, we go for walks and we walk by this. So I'm like, have my phone and camera ready for I can't wait to post this, kind of a thing, or show people. And then some other disadvantages are that thatch, and sod basically is grown on peat bogs, and it basically comes with this sod layer, or this thatch layer and I see a lot of yards, after a couple of years, maybe the homeowner doesn't stay up on the irrigation. We have drought where the whole lawn will fry because of that thatch, and it takes so much water to re-soak that thatch and to get down into the soil. So I'm going to show you some before and after photos too of a neighbor of mine who their lawn was sodded. He had moved into this house, and the previous owner didn't take care of it, and so it just fried. And so I'll show you some before and after photos later. But again, why choose seed over sod? Well, when you've got a small area that's only about a foot wide, or a square foot, you're not going to sod it, so you're going to seed it. And it might be too shady. Most sod, and that's one of the other disadvantages of sodding with Kentucky bluegrass, is you don't really get to pick the species. It's more than likely going to be Kentucky bluegrass, unless you special order it, and it's going to be expensive. And so here are some of the other considerations when using seed, right? Sunny and shade conditions. So most likely seed with perennial ryegrass will fail if it's very shady. And that's, one of the issues we see is a lot of times people will come with questions or will say, yeah, I seeded and it came in great. And then after a couple of years, or a year or two, it just doesn't look very good. And I have to reseed it. It's like, well, you still have that bag of grass seed that you use, look to see what was in it, and that's definitely a thing that I get a lot. You want to make sure that you have good to seed to soil contact for faster germination, because the close proximity to the soil can absorb and retain moisture. And then, these seeds need consistent moisture, but you also don't want to overwater them too. And then erosion blankets like this can aid in germination because it helps retain moisture and helps prevent washouts during the heavy rainstorms. So to help you succeed, or to help somebody succeed, you really should know what are in the contents of a bag of grass seed. And in most cases, it's a mixture of different grass seeds. The contents are on the label, and we're going to kind of do a fun little exercise and go through a label. And there's a lot of inert matter or filler. There might be coating on the seed, peat moss, fertilizer, and then even possibly weed seeds. So again, like in Minnesota, a bag of seed is typically going to be the cool season grasses that we talked about. And then again, be careful on the perennial ryegrass. And that's a good example right there of kind of that shiny behind, that leaf blade of the perennial ryegrass there. So seed sizes, it's kind of interesting. You can kind of see the Kentucky bluegrass is the smallest seed, tall fescue is the largest. And, this will determine your seeding rates for the most part, because with the Kentucky bluegrass, if you have, like a seeding project, knowing the seeding rates is going to be vital to the success of a project. And they vary from species to species. Like for an example, like if you have a pound of Kentucky bluegrass seed, there's typically about, say, 1 million seeds in a pound. Where tall fescue, it's about the 10th. Or I should say, Kentucky bluegrass is a 10th as large as tall fescue. And so in a pound of tall fescue seed, there's typically about 100,000 seeds. So that's why you need higher seeding rates and to equal the same amount of seed for those species. So one of the things that we recommend is using blends and mixtures. A blend is a combination of multiple cultivars of the same species. A mixture is usually a combination of, say, tall fescue, fine fescue, and perennial ryegrass. And so the benefit of doing this is just providing genetic diversity, because it can improve the overall resilience of environmental stresses. And, if you had, like I said earlier, if you have, say, a monoculture or a monostand, it might wipe out the whole stand if you have just one. So that's why it is a benefit to have the mixtures and the blends in more than one variety of grass. And, like different grass species can vary in drought tolerance and shade adaptation. And so, like, for example, Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue, like the spring green up, where we know that Kentucky bluegrass typically greens up faster than tall fescue. Winter survival versus drought tolerance, where it's nice to kind of have, if you have a mixture of them, you're kind of covering both ends, just kind of like the germination factor, where if you have a mixture of Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue, you do have like kind of a nurse crop, waiting, while the Kentucky bluegrass is hasn't germinated yet, so you're kind of have a seed that holds the moisture. And so using these mixtures definitely helps. And then the blends, I'll kind of go through this slide here. You can kind of see this is a bag of Kentucky bluegrass seed. There's 3 different varieties of Kentucky bluegrass, and same with the tall fescue. Each grass has 3 different cultivars or varieties of each. And we've got our mixture here. You can see the genetic diversity here, because you got creeping red fescue, chewing fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, hard fescue, sheep, and perennial ryegrass. There are 6 different species in this mixture. All right, so here's kind of some fun. We're going to go through this step by step, and we'll just, a lot of this stuff you really don't need to know. But like, for instance, who cares really where it's from? What's the difference for the most part? But you see the seed company, you see the seed lot number. And this is really just being able to track where the seed came from. And like the variety, the percent purity, and then weed and other crop seeds, inert matter, noxious weeds, the germination percentage of each grass, and then date of the germination test. And so we're gonna kind of go through and at this bag of grass seed and see if we would recommend this grass. So pure seed is greater than 90%. This bag is, let me go back. This bag has 96.84% seed, pure seed. So that's good. Germination greater than 80%. This bag is 85%. Other crop less than 5.5%. This bag is 0.1%. Weed seeds less than 0.4%. And this one is 0.06%. Noxious weeds, right? You don't want Canada thistle in a bag of grass seed. So noxious weeds, 0. Let's hope that the bag of grass seed has 0. Inert matter, see, we don't want it, less than 8%, and this one is 3%. And then date within the last 9 months. And so when I did this bag of grass seed, that it was last year spring. So so after going through this label, we would recommend this bag of Kentucky bluegrass, assuming that is the best grass for the site. Like if this were a full shade area, we wouldn't recommend this grass. And so like one of the things you want to be aware of is like the quick lawn. While they do provide fast germination, they might not last beyond a growing season or 2. And so you can see that this bag has almost 50%, it's 48.78% annual ryegrass. Well, we know that it's not going to live following a winter. And so that's not good to start with. And then like the bag on the left there has almost 40% perennial ryegrass. So basically in this bag, you're getting about 90% grass that we probably don't really even recommend using for a lawn. They serve their purpose. Like if you absolutely need to get some grass going, this will do the trick. But if you're looking for long-term success, you don't want this bag of grass. So like another thing that, Italian ryegrass. So it sounds like a fancy name. It's not, you don't see it on here, but Italian ryegrass is a fancy name for annual ryegrass. So don't be fooled by that one either. And then this particular bag, this is just something to notice that a lot of bags, it's grassy, do provide seeding rates for you. So just so that you know that it's something to look for your seeding projects. And so some other things to avoid are like new and Lynn perennial ryegrass. Now these are poor, they provide very poor turf quality and so one of the reasons why they're more forage type, and so you wouldn't want them in your lawn. And then variety not stated, you can see the asterisks here. The who knows what types of sheep fescue or annual ryegrass. A lot of times we'll see like tall fescue as a variety not stated. Well, that's not good either because it could easily be Kentucky 31 tall fescue, and this is the one that we do not recommend. And here's another photo of it, the up close photo of Kentucky 31. So I would guess that many people have seen this or have this in their lawn where it just kind of sticks out. It's that bunch type. And yeah, you do not want Kentucky 31 bag of grass seed in most cases, So watch out for coated seeds, while, they do typically help performance during germination and establishment. The coatings that typically consist of inert matter, clay, polymers, fertilizers, and they do help or they can help with moisture retention, which aids in the germination and whatnot. And it can help with, like, it doubles the size of the seed and it's easier to spread the seed out. But a known disadvantage is that it's basically adding weight. So like, look at that. If you bought a 3-pound bag of grass seed, 50% of it is the coating material. So you're only really getting 1.5 pounds of grass seed. And so a lot of people don't really know that. And so, do they work? Yes. It's just, you just kind of want to watch out for them. And then the other half of this is that this bag of grass seed has annual ryegrass in it too, and perennial ryegrass. So it's kind of, in my mind, it's kind of a double whammy for coated seeds. So you just got to know what you're looking for when it comes to grass seed. And then we've got the all-in-one fertilizer. It's generally a very, very poor value, just because, again, look at these seeding rates here. While I'm looking at these seeds, these cultivars here, they're pretty good. They're not bad at all. But the problem is you've got this 8.3-pound bag of seed, and 93% of it is inert matter, and only 0.5 pounds of the bag is seed. So definitely something. Now this bag of seed, I think, is okay to use, but don't count on it. Don't count on the seed. Like in this case, a lot of times what I would recommend is buy a bag of grass seed it with the grass seed, and then maybe use this as kind of a cover, to help with aiding in germination and stuff like that. And don't necessarily count on the seed that comes from this as good, that it'll turn your lawn into, it'll like cover your whole lawn, because it won't by itself. So yeah, and we typically would avoid avoid this, except if you're maybe using it for little spot treated areas. Okay, next. So I kind of talked about this earlier a little bit. This is something that I've been observing. So me and my wife, we visit a friend of ours in a memory care unit, and every couple weeks. And so over the course of a couple years, I've noticed how this area here keeps, you know what? I gotta go back one. Yeah, okay. Yep, here we go. Sorry. But so you see 11/22, 2024, you've got your salt here. Right? This is nice green along the edge of the sidewalk. And then by 1/4, it's already kind of turned brown. Yes, it's winter, but I'm already thinking, okay, I think I know what's going to happen here. And then 2025, you see the salt again. They threw it right there. And then again, on 329, it's mostly dead again. So it's just, and then this summer, it's basically bare dirt again. So that nice seeding that they did from the previous year on, it's all dead again. And I think they've given up. So how can you stop this vicious cycle is, start to look for salt tolerant grass seed. And, while it's not, bulletproof, I think that you have a better chance of success if you're going to be dealing with salt every single year. And introducing this salt tolerant mixture might be an example. And most, all of these cultivars on here are very, are salt tolerant. And I know that sea breeze, like slender creeping red fescue, has shown the best like salt tolerance of all the grasses. So it's pretty cool. Things you might need for seeding, right? We've got these erosion blankets. There are these Excelsior mats that you might find in, say, Menards or something like that. I know they'll have rolls of erosion blankets that you might, this thing is a little spiker, and it's kind of a professional spiker that, like most, maybe a lawn care company, or like, I know we use them quite often in the golf course industry, that can help spike the seed into the soil. And so let's talk about like, when is the best time to seed? And now this is kind of more for the Twin Cities area. I think I would throw like the Crow Wing County in more the 11th through the 17th, because it just all depends on the weather, of course, but you're typically up there usually like a week ahead of the Twin Cities, like and when I lived in St. Cloud for a long time, we were about a week. Let's see, how did this go? We were typically like a week ahead of the Twin Cities in the fall when it came to cooling off, and usually a week behind them in the springtime when all the leaves are and the trees are starting to pop. In St. Cloud, they weren't. And I would say in Brainerd, it's probably another, few days or week behind even the Twin Cities. So keep this in mind, that this is ever changing, this calendar, because we could easily have frost by the 9th of September. We've seen it before, and that can start to slow things down. And so, but every year is going to be different. Brainerd compared to Albert Lee is going to be different versus International Falls. And when you're planning your seeding date, you just want to make sure that you're paying attention to the weather. So if you missed your window, your ideal window of seeding, August or September, the next best time to seed is a process we call dormant seeding. And this is typically timing it when the soil temperatures are too low for the seed to germinate. And the seeds will remain dormant until spring when conditions are favorable for germination. So the nice thing also is that dormant seeding does not require the homeowner to be out there watering like it does in this time of the year, because you're trying to get the seeds to germinate and establish. Well, you've got to be watering. And then, the newly emerging seedlings typically don't require a lot of water, just because there's usually sufficient moisture already. And it's important not to seed too early in case soil temperatures too early, I guess. What I'm saying is, like, you don't want to seed too late for the summer seeding, but too early for the dormant seeding, because if it germinates, you might have very weak seedlings going into winter, and there's a very good chance they'll die. So this was a seeding project I was a part of here on campus. We dormant seeded on the 8th of November, and we got snow like the next day. and that snow remained around on the whole winter. It kept soil temperatures from dropping too low. They stayed around 32 degrees. And then as that snow receded, the grass was already germinating on May 1st. So now think about if you were trying to do this in springtime, when you've got all these cold temperatures, you're putting seed out, like hypothetically, you're gonna, let's say you seed April 15th, soil temps are between 30 and 40. Well, that seed's not just gonna sit there. It's not gonna do anything. While the stuff that you dormant seeded is already in the ground, it's already primed to germinate. So that's just something to think about. So, the challenge is the cold soil temperatures. And then you might be dealing with muddy conditions because of the snow melt. And then you might have competition. So this is knotweed popping up immediately in the springtime. It's usually the first thing to germinate. And so there's your competition for your early spring germination and seeding. So, and then, with, I do know that with proper planning, that spring seeding can be successful. You just got to kind of know what you're up against. And then what to expect from summer. Stress, very stressful. And then, while summer is great because it has warmer soil temperatures that can help with rapid germination, you also have extreme temperatures. So like in that photo on the left, we had some seed pop and it was germinating and looking okay, but then it got nailed by some heat and we lost it. You could see all that brown in there, it got killed. So we had to reseed. And then you've got the weed pressure. So this was kind of what I was talking about, where on the left side of that weed pressure photo was the Kentucky bluegrass. And then on the right side is the tall fescue. So you can see there's less crabgrass in the tall fescue than there is the Kentucky bluegrass, just because the tall fescue was already starting to establish where the Kentucky bluegrass had not. So, other potential issues with summer seeding is going to be your disease pressure. Just you might have something, wet conditions from watering, humid nights, warm days, humid nights, and you might have Pythium blight. And I've seen seedlings wiped out from Pythium blight called damping off. So that's why we do recommend waiting until late summer to seed versus summer. And I've written some articles about, or I wrote a blog post about, if you're thinking about seeding in June and July, I'd wait just until the end of, mid to late August for sure. And so we're also dealing with, let's check my time here. Okay. I'll get through this. 12:55. All right. Potential washouts, the growing phase, can take quite a while to establish. And so, if weather can determine if you're going to have success or failure. So again, keep that in mind. You can have the greatest plan in the world, but it can, and you can do everything right. But all it takes is the weather to not cooperate, and you might have to do it again or add more seed to it. So, and that's tough. So let's just kind of do this quick thing. How much seed do I need for an area? We've got this known area of about, and let's just round it up to 3,000 square feet. Seeding calculation exercise. So, the area. Let's just say you're going to use fine fescue at a 5 pounds per thousand seeding rate. 5 times the 2,800 is going to be 14 pounds of seed for that area. That's how much seed you would need for that area. And then we typically would tell people, like, it's a good practice to buy more seed for an area, because you don't want to, you'd rather put a little bit too much seed down or have a little extra than not enough, because it'll take longer for the area to fill in if you only bought 10 pounds for an area that required 15 pounds. So keep that in mind. And then we've got another project here, how much seed would you need for a renovation? And okay, so let's go through this step by step. This area is a quarter acre lot. A quarter acre is about 11,000 square feet. 5,000 square feet is covered by the house, the driveway, the landscape. And so that leaves you about 6,000 square feet. Again, 5 pounds per thousand, and then 5 times that 6 is the 6,000 square feet. So you would need 30 pounds of seed for this project. And so, it's a lot to consider when seeding. And I would say like the key takeaway is that it might not be simple, and then just be prepared and be patient. And so here are some of these before after photos I showed you. So this was my neighbor, August of 2023. We seeded in late August. And so you can see by October 23rd, it was already starting to fill in. And then look at last year fall, it looked great. And then here's another area of his lawn that was really suffering, and by October looking good. And so look at the following year, it filled in very, very well. And then again, this was that area that I talked about where we overseeded with fine fescue in this full shade area. This was early spring where the leaves weren't on the trees yet. And you can see how shady that area is. And, so it can be simple, but you have to know what to look for. So, like in this case, you don't want to just go to the store and buy a shade of, or a bag of like Sunny Shade. You probably, you might be able to find mostly fine fescue in there, but there's a good chance you might find some perennial ryegrass in there. And so, knowing this and knowing some of this from today, I think will help you. A couple more slides here. One of the easiest ways, like if a lawn is struggling, one of the easiest ways to improve a lawn is just to raise the mower height. And so here's a personal example. I don't know if my neighbor would enjoy me showing this, but here's my lawn on the left side at 3.5 inches. And my neighbor, I don't know why she does it, but she really mows it super short. And you can see, only thing I do to my lawn is I put down a pound of slow release fertilizer in the springtime. And I don't know what she does, but except I know she mows it really short. So you can see I don't have any weeds. If I do, I'll just pluck them or spot spray them, where her lawn has a lot of weeds. And then another simple thing you can do is make sure that you have a sharp blade, where a sharp blade provides a clean and even cut. It reduces stress on the grass. Dull mower blades tear the grass as it cuts. It produces frayed edges. And then it also provides turf grasses potentially being more susceptible to diseases, and it creates opening for pathogens. And then it also loses water more rapidly through the leaf blades. So it's going to require more water to keep it looking healthy. And then here's another favorite one of mine. Is this was a research project that we worked on. You can see the turf mowed at 1.5 inches of crab. Look at all the crabgrass in the 1.5 versus the 3.5 inches. So it just really reinforces that 3.5 can naturally outcompete crabgrass and prevent it from germinating. One of the things we do recommend that people mulch their grass clippings back into the lawn. You also, making sure that, because you're basically recycling the nutrients back into the lawn. And I know studies have shown that by recycling and putting the grass blades back into your lawn, that it ends up equaling about an application of like a 1/2 pound of nitrogen per year. So collecting clippings is also, I think, more work, because then you're going to the compost site, and one misconception is that clippings produce thatch, which that is not the case. So again, the photo on the right, that's just mowing too short. Like, let's just say the lawn was 6 inches and they mowed it down to 2 inches. They're not following the 1/3 rule, which we talk about, where you never want to mow more than a third of the leaf blade off just because it's so stressful. So like, for example, you wouldn't want to mow your lawn from 4 inches to 2 inches because that's 50% of the leaf blades. So keep that in mind. That is one thing that you can do to help you, reduce stress. And so one other water conservation thing that I'm going to include in this is just, observing the weather can really eliminate unnecessary irrigation when rain is in the forecast, and know that irrigation is supplemental to rainfall. So if we're not getting rain, well, yeah, of course you can irrigate. But if we're a rainy year like this, there's a really good chance, unless you have really sandy soils, you might not have irrigated at all this year. I've hardly irrigated my house at all, so it's been great. Saving money, I like it. And then, we do recommend using deep and infrequent irrigation because it might help you hold out until the next rainfall. And then, if you have an irrigation system, check your sensors. Like, one of the easiest things to do to eliminate unnecessary irrigation is just to make sure your rain sensor is working. So like in the photo on top, this is again my house. The rain sensor has shut off the irrigation. You can see it's off, even though it's still in the run position. So I think it's such a simple fix and such an easy thing to do. And I have my neighbors that have no idea. I think that our rain sensors have batteries in them and that they need to be changed because they're irrigating when it's raining. And so I've seen it. So, and that's it. So that's all I have. And I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. I know I learned a lot. Uh, do you have a couple minutes for us to open it up to
Yeah,
questions?
absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so one from the chat was addressing excess crabgrass and weeds this year. Also need to overseed. Best to seed in this window of time, which I think she was referring to kind of the summer window of time that you had up, and then use pre-emergent in the spring, question mark, or can we both seed and use pre-emergent in the spring at the same time?
Yeah, that's the one thing. Like, if you're thinking about, okay, I have a crabgrass problem and next spring I'm going to put pre-emergent down. Yeah, pre-emergent, it does prohibit grass seeds from germinating. So if you're going to try to do something with grass seed this year, it's kind of that window now. And I know that pretty soon, once we kind of hit that first frost this year, that crabgrass will die out, and that's kind of your window. But one of the things too that we've been working on here, one of the researchers, is dormant seeding the crabgrass into crabgrass areas. And so with tall fescue especially has been working very well because one of the reasons why crabgrass is so prevalent in a lot of areas is because there might not be irrigation, or again, like the mowing might be too short, but it has so many seeds just sitting there waiting to germinate. But if you can start to establish some grass seed into those areas, raise your height of cut, you might start to prohibit the crabgrass from germinating. And then you can potentially start using the pre-emergence, where then you're kind of stopping that cycle, you're fertilizing. But just having a healthy lawn will help those situations for sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, and like if you do want some more information on dormant seeding, I should have wrote this down. We do have on our blog. So if you go to turf.umn.edu, that will bring you to our blog post and our website. And you can like go back like a number of pages. We have so many pages, unfortunately. But if you go back, you can find some information on dormant seeding. and it's really good stuff. And I have a Z link for it. But I should have written it down. I think it's like Z dot, I don't want to tell you bad information. So
If
I can
you
look it
find it,
up.
you can email it to me and I can
I
send it
can
out
do
to
that. I'll do
everybody
that. I'll do that.
if you have time, yeah.
Yep.
So, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, one in person.
He didn't say anything about trying to amend the soil. So I have a very sparse lawn and I have a lot of sand. Does he recommend putting down soil first, or how do you do that?
Okay, so the question, I'll restate it just for people on Zoom, is the questioner is wondering about amending the soil. They have a sandy lawn or sandy soil with a sparse lawn. What are your thoughts and recommendations on amending the soil?
So like, are you thinking like top dressing it maybe with a compost or something like that, or like more like black dirt potentially and then seeding it? Is that kind of the thought?
Yeah, I think she said she's leaning more towards black dirt and then seeding.
Okay. Yeah, that if that's what you would do, or if that's what you're thinking of doing, I think that would be an okay way of doing it. You know, one thing we do sometimes recommend, like if you're gonna overseed, if you can aerate and overseed, and then maybe potentially top dress, you know, because the point of it is, as long as you can get like those grass seeds down into the canopy, and then if you were to come over and top dress, you know, it doesn't have to be, you don't want it too heavy, but even if you get a nice thin, say 1/4 inch layer of top dressing, black dirt, to kind of protect that seed, and it should help. It most definitely should help with the seed germination process. And then, you know, like some other question, you know, I'll always, I always come back with like a lot of questions in this situation where it's like, well, do you have an irrigation system? You know, no, you're okay.
No irrigation.
Yep.
No.
No irrigation system, mostly sandy soils. So like in that case, you know, you're probably gonna want to look for like tall fescue, or if you know you're going to be using Kentucky bluegrass, uh, you know that it's going to take a while for it to germinate if you're looking to do it like right now. And you know, where a lot of times I will recommend people that do not have irrigation systems and they don't want to, you know, pull out the manual sprinkler and water all the time, and sometimes people are gone during the day. So the best time to seed is during this window now, but a lot of, you know, without an underground sprinkler system, sometimes it can be difficult because it's the middle of the day and it's 90 degrees and windy. Well, your newly germinated seed is frying because you don't have an irrigation set up. So then, well, maybe the best situation for that case is going to be dormant seeding. And if I can provide some of that information today, you know, with that email to you about the dormant seeding process, then they can plan what they want to do and plan where they want to buy the seed, because without planning for it, sometimes you feel rushed and then you don't have a good plan. You just fling out the seed and it maybe fails because you're not properly prepared for it. So that's why I like to tell people, well, if you miss that window, you can always dormant seed. And then hopefully come next springtime, the seed pops and, you know, you can maybe help it out if you need to with the sandy soils. But like in those situations without irrigation, with sandy soils, I lean towards tall fescue. So I think that's kind of what you'd want to look for too. But also knowing the talk today, the disadvantages of tall fescue, where you'd probably also want to do a mixture of tall fescue and maybe some fine fescues and maybe, you know, some small percentages of Kentucky bluegrass. So that's the beauty of the mixture. So then eventually it's kind of a survival of the fittest.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. One more question.
What does it mean by overseeding, and what's the best equipment to use for seeding, just a handheld or?
So the question is, what do you mean by overseeding, and what's the best equipment to use for doing that? Like a handheld seed spreader or other recommendations?
Yeah, like, so overseeding is basically seeding into an existing lawn. So you already have lawn present, maybe it's sparse, kind of like the photos I showed you, and then you seed into an existing lawn. That's kind of overseeding. And you can basically do and use whatever equipment that you want. So like a one of those handheld broadcast spreaders are fine. A rotary spreader is fine. A drop spreader is fine. You can easily also do it by hand, but you also have to know your seeding rate, and that's why it's like, it's okay. So like, let's just hypothetically say, you're going to be seeding into 1,000 square feet, and you're going to use a seeding rate from a mixture of 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So you're going to need 5 pounds of seed, and it doesn't matter what product or equipment you use. You just have to make sure that you're putting down that total 5 pounds into that 1,000 square feet, and it's spread out, equally. And we'll usually say, like, try to go in 2 different directions, where you maybe go, front to back, and then go side to side. So like 2 different directions to help spread it out more evenly, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yep.
All right. Any other questions in person or online? I'm not seeing any. Lots of thank yous and great info. One more here. I have a clay-based soil along the North Shore. My yard is covered with crabgrass, and we also get lots of ground flooding during the spring thaw. What's the best way to remove the crabgrass and replace with better grass?
Okay. So again, I think like in that case, I would, let's see. I would think about, to get rid of crabgrass, you basically have to have a species in place, kind of like I had mentioned. If you can get like grass to grow, the crabgrass seed is just waiting there to germinate. And when there isn't any competition, you've got warm areas by the sidewalk, it's just waiting to germinate. And so if there isn't any competition, it's gonna naturally win. So like in that case, I think potentially the dormant seeding. And I know you mentioned like spring is kind of tough because the snow melt and there's a lot of runoff potentially. Like in that case, I would, like, if this is me, this is how I like to say things. Like if it's me, and if it's my project, and knowing what I know about that, I would more than likely, because you probably currently have a lot of crabgrass right there, I would, wait to dormant seed, use, say, like a tall fescue or a mixture of something with tall fescue in there, and then use some type of like seeding blanket along that edge, because then that seeding blanket will help hold the seed in place. So even when you kind of get that flooding, hopefully it'll hold that seed in place. You'll have better moisture retention, and then hopefully you start to get that seed to germinate. And then if you have enough seed germination, you might be able to, come June, like if the crabgrass hasn't germinated, or if it's barely germinated, you might be able to put out like a pre-emergent yet. Every scenario is different. So you might want to just try to get turf established first. And then even if you get some crabgrass, at least you already have some turf there that's already competing with the crabgrass, so that next fall, then you can maybe you'll have less crabgrass. Again, some of those things where I said raise the height of cut, that can potentially help. So hopefully that helped that that question.
Yep, they said thank you.
All
in the
right.
chat, so thank you very
Yep.
much. All right, last call for questions. Yeah, I'm not hearing any, so thanks so much for zooming in today, Gary. We really appreciated it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me and we'll follow up, okay? With an
Okay,
email.
sounds good.
All right, excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.